Gerry on your left, Jadine on your right. Black Blue mid-range looks like it's starting to pick up a little bit here in popularity. I know red was the talk of the town coming in, Todd, but Black Blue mid-range might be a pretty good choice.
Oh, for sure. Moving away from Glint Sleeve Siphoner, obviously not something I love. Most players opting to put it into the sideboard just because of how bad it is against Goblin Chain Whirler.
Jadine will have the first play after a drowned Catacombs. It is the very powerful 2/3 lifelinker.
Don't forget Death Touch.
You're right. You're right. As Thompson will play a hub, and now he'll play Glint Sleeve Siphoner. So Siphoner probably better than Gifted Aetherborn. But Gifted Aetherborn,
so?
no slouch, as there's a fatal push, and now Jadine will come across here for 2. I'm curious if she has a third land, though. Continue.
One player has 2 more life, the other player has 2 energy. You know, they both died a fatal push. What do you want?
Ooh, another Siphoner, though both players missing their lands. Here comes the Aetherborn yet again. Jadine going to come up to 24. Thompson will fall down to 16. There's land number 3 for Jadine. And now a Never from Never to Return will take care of the Siphoner.
Yeah, one of the easiest ways to lose these black-blue mid-range matches is to let Glint Sleeve Siphoner go off the rails. And having those cheap interactive removal spells like Fatal Push and Never to Return, obviously those get worse as the game progresses because you need to find answers to things like the Scarab God. But if you don't have one of those answers early, a single Glint Sleeve Siphoner can bury you.
Siphoners are dead. Gifted Aetherborn very much alive as Klomparens is going to come up to 26. Thompson will fall down to 14. The follow-up here is a copy of Champion of Wits. Essence Scatter will take care of that. Thompson had to use an energy to do it, so he's down to 2. Land number 3 here for Gerry. Continue, partner.
Both players missing land drops early. Jadine able to hit her 3rd and 4th lands before Gerry hits his 3rd. It's going to be the tale of this game. The Scarab God, Essence Scatter number 2. I spoke too soon.
Essence Scatter number 2 does take care of the Scarab God. Had it not, this game may have been over before Gerry could ever catch back up. Well, here's another copy of the Scarab God. Does Gerry have another counterspell? It looks like the answer is yes, and Supreme will. So Thompson has done a nice job of countering the Scarab God. Now he'll follow up with some sort of checklist card.
Some sort of checklist card.
Well, here's the Scarab God number 3. That checklist card was Argul's Bloodfast, and that is a really good card, but I don't know if it's better than the 3rd Scarab God, which Jadine did have.
I would not be surprised to see Gerry pay 2 mana and draw a card here. He doesn't have a land drop. He needs to find his 4th land to unlock the potential for Vraska's Contempt. If he's able to draw land, he gets to draw another card. I don't know. This is looking pretty bad. Untapping with Scarab God is usually bad for business.
And here's an attack for 5 from Jadine. Thompson's going to fall down to 7 as Klomparens starting to run away with this thing. There's another land and an island, and that means she'll be able to activate the Scarab God at her leisure as we're going to head back over to Gerry here in just a moment. And Gerry will untap and draw a card, and he is all done here. As Scarab God number 3 is as many lands as Gerry drew that particular game. As Jadine Klomparens is going to win game number 1 here over Gerry Thompson. The Black Blue mid-range player on your right wins game number 1. We will go to the sideboards here in just a moment, but first, a couple of messages. We are back getting ready for game number 2 between Gerry Thompson and Jadine Klomparens in a black-blue mid-range mirror here in the standard portion of day number 1 of our Season 1 Invitational here at SCG-Con. We'll start with Thompson as he'll be on the play here. Lost game number 1 with his 3 Duress, 3 Negate, 2 Deadeye Tracker, 2 Knight of Malice, a Cast Down, a Confiscation Coup, a Glimmer of Genius, River's Rebuke, and a Sorcerer's Spyglass. Todd, he lost to the Scarab God game number 1. What can you do to make things a little bit better?
So this isn't a true mirror. I thought Gerry was going to be very favored in game 1 because he had main deck Glensleeve Siphoner and Jadine did not. Instead going with the non-vulnerable to Chain Whirler gifted Aetherborn. Losing that game because he missed some land drops and Jadine drew 3 the Scarab Gods. Not really where he wanted to be. After sideboard, this matchup gets a lot more complex. It becomes way more about who can land the Bloodfast first. Okay. And if you're able to land Arguel's Bloodfast against an opponent that does not have it, usually it takes over the game because neither of you can pressure each other's life total that well thanks to so much removal. I think that he really wants to play a control game with things like Duress and Negate and slim down on creatures. Like, you know, the Ravenous Chupacabras, those things aren't nearly as good.
For Jadine, 4 Glensleeve Siphoners you have to imagine are going to come in. 3 Duress, 2 Arguel's Bloodfast, 2 Negate, 2 copies of the Eldest Reborn. That's a new one there from Dominaria, along with another copy of Sorcerer's Kanta and a Sorcerer's Spyglass. Anything particular outside of the Siphoners that you like?
Yeah, like all of it. Just every single card. It just seems dope. Gerry has a lot of these cards in his main deck, so I think just a natural swap of like the Duresses Negates are going to be both coming in from both sides, I believe. The Eldest Reborn, I think, is going to be the kicker. That card is so good, and it's something that doesn't die to the removal spells that both players play. But Gerry does have a number of counter spells in his deck, so he might be able to, you know, keep the Eldest Reborn from doing anything particularly busted.
Well, those are the options there for both players. We are underway here in game number 2. Thompson going to start things off with this merge Boneyard into a swamp. Jadine with a swamp, and we'll see where she goes next. It'll be a Drowned Catacombs. This looks like it's going to be...
It doesn't matter what it is, it's good.
They're both good, yeah.
Skanta or if it's Bloodfast, both of those are insanely good on turn 2. Neither gets hit with a fatal push like Glensleeve Siphoner and looks to dominate the game. Now, with both players playing only 2 colors, they have access to a lot of Field of Ruin, so these cards don't necessarily win the game on the spot. Bloodfast being much better on the front side than the back side, but Skanta being much better on the back side than the front side means it's a little more vulnerable.
Champion of Wits is where Thompson will go now. So he'll draw 2, be discarding 2 cards here in just a moment.
Here I would lean on discarding some of your early removal spells. Jadine didn't play a Siphoner on 1, but extra lands, that's fine.
Looks like Glensleeve Siphoner and a Field of Ruin will go to the graveyard there for Thompson. We head back over to Klomparens, who will take the Fatal Pools on top of the deck and place it into the graveyard. Swamp will be the play. Pass the turn back over to Thompson. Will Jadine. Gerry going to come in here for 2 with the Champion of Wits. Jadine will fall down to 18. Here is a Swamp. See if there's a follow-up here for Gerry or not. And it looks like the answer is no. So, Sorcerer's Kanta will trigger again here for Jadine. Got to put Fatal Push into the graveyard. Jadine will draw a card. I know both these players had land issues in the first game. Doesn't look like either is having land issues this game, as both players have their first 4 land drops. Jadine considering playing Gonti, Lord of Luxury, but going to side against it as here's a Glimmer of Genius from Thompson.
When, both players kind of sitting on their hands. Gerry having access to Glimmer of Genius here, though, a pretty huge deal since he's able to leverage that extra mana. Jadine, I think, was trying to play around some sort of counterspell by not playing the Gonti, maybe wanting to find a Duress or something to lead with. But here, Gerry just punishing her for leaving so much mana untapped by casting this Glimmer.
Here is the Glimmer from Thompson. He's going to keep those 2 cards, not going to scry any of them to the bottom. So now he'll draw another card full hand here for the Pro Tour Amonkhet champion.
I'm not sure if Gerry had the option to discard that 3rd Swamp over the Field of Ruin, but I would have liked to have seen him hold on to a Field of Ruin if he doesn't already have one in hand.
Well, it looks like he does have one in hand at this stage, as here is a Doomfall. So it looks like he's doing okay on the Field of Ruin front. Sure. Doomfall is going to be using the first mode target opponent, actually the second mode, pardon me. At least it's going to attempt to, as Vraska's Contempt will be the response there from Jadine. Now she'll show her hand.
All right, how many times do you think I've misclicked with Doomfall and Magic Online and chosen target opponent exiles a creature he or she controls versus the bottom one?
The answer sounds like a non-zero amount. That's my guess.
Yeah.
The answer is not 0.
I'm too embarrassed to say.
Thompson going to write down the contents here. Field of Ruin, Liliana, Death's Mastery, Ravenous Chupacabra, Champion of Wits, and, of course, that Gonti, Lord of Luxury that we knew about in Jadine's hand. And Gerry will take the Ravenous Chupacabra, going to follow things up with the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. And perhaps that 2-1 can run away with the game as Jadine is going to look at the top card there.
Yeah, Gerry apparently not too worried about Liliana Death's Majesty. Either Jadine ticks down to get something back, which it looks like she has no creatures in the graveyard right now. But if she hits something off of the Escanta, that would leave the Liliana at 2 loyalty, and the Siphoner checks it. Or if she ticks up, he probably has Vraska's Contempt in hand. He just wanted to make sure his Siphoner was clear of a removal spell, which taking the Chupacabra means exactly that.
Yeah, this looks like it's going to be a card economy battle here. Gerry's already resolved a Glimmer of Genius. He's looking to get more cards off of the Glint Sleeve Siphoner, and it could be about who accumulates more resources in this game. This is one way for him to fight back against that search for Escanta. Here is Gonti, Lord of Luxury. That will resolve top 4 cards here for Jadine.
Love this play by Jadine, digging for something like Fatal Push to just tempo kill the Siphoner. Unfortunately, she misses, but she still hits a pretty good card out of it.
Found the card. She's happy to exile. The rest of the cards will go to the bottom of Thompson's library. Thompson going to pay 2 energy and a life to draw a card. So Glint Sleeve Siphoner will replace itself. Thompson will draw another card here. Picked up an island and a mystery card there for the 2 draws. And I imagine we'll see the Siphoner come in here in just a moment as Gerry does explain exactly where he got the energy from.
Yeah, that first Siphoner got binned, I believe, by a discard.
It did.
But the Glimmer of Genius did create 2 energy, and the Siphoner created 1/1 entered the battlefield.
Thompson does have a 6th land. He'll play that Field of Ruin. He's had in his hand for just a little while.
Gerry's hand, I think, is very good. It looks something like the Scarab God and Torrential Gearhulk. Wouldn't be surprised if Gerry goes for a main phase Torrential Gearhulk on Glimmer of Genius just to keep the cards flowing and the energy high for the Siphoner.
Looks like he's going to wait for the moment, however. He's just going to pass with the 6-man available, which means that Jadine does have to play around a lot of different things. The top card of Jadine's library will go into the graveyard. It's one of those checklist cards. Could be an Arguel's Bloodblast, could be another copy of Search for Escanta. Regardless, it's in the graveyard now. It's card number 4 that's in there in case you're tracking Search for Escanta at home. Land number 6 for Jadine means that she has access to 6 mana like Gerry does. However, Todd, Jadine only has a single blue mana, so Torrential Gearhulk is not something Thompson currently has to play around.
Yeah, I mean, she could eventually find it with the Field of Ruin, obviously, but right now that is not the case.
For Thompson, he's going to play a Torrential Gearhulk on the end step, and it's going to be the Glimmer of Genius, much like you predicted. A little bit more energy and keep the cards flowing here, both with the Glimmer and with the Siphoner.
Yeah, I mean, if Gerry had a counterspell sitting on the Torrential Gearhulk was likely correct. Just wanting to make sure that Jadine was unable to resolve a game-breaking spell. It's also kind of a bait card, that Torrential Gearhulk, because Gerry has the Scarab God in hand. He wants Jadine to use a Vraska's Contempt or something on the Torrential Gearhulk so he can cast a Scarab God safely.
Field of Ruin is going to go active, and that will take care of a Field of Ruin from Gerry Thompson.
I'm so sad about this island. I love the new unlands, and this makes my head hurt.
Well, Jadine's working with the islands that she's got, my friend. Maybe she's trying to troll you, as there is a Vraska's Contempt now on the end step. Vraska's Contempt from Gerry's graveyard, from Gerry's library via Gonti going to go into Gerry's graveyard, and we'll see exactly which card Jadine actually wants to kill here, and it's going to be the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Maybe the more powerful of the 2, believe it or not, even though it doesn't have the most power and toughness.
Once it's on the battlefield, just the threat of drawing a card every other turn or every single turn, depending on how much energy you have. Like the Torrential Gearhulk's 5 damage. You can survive that for a while. Gonti has Death Touch. I think that's definitely the right play there.
Thompson will now play a Champion of Wits. He'll draw 2 cards, be discarding 2 cards here in just a moment. Looks like Scarab God among the cards Gerry has found. A lot of cards in Thompson's hand at this stage of things. And we'll see exactly which ones he wants to discard. This black-blue mid-range deck, note the black in front of the blue because this is a very black-based deck, is the one that Gerry Thompson is playing, as he's going to actually play a copy of Deadeye Tracker.
Yes, sir.
That is a card we will take a look at here in a moment, as that one's an unorthodox one we don't see a lot of in Standard, as Jadine's going to turn over Field of Ruin. The 1/1 Human Pirate for a single black. For a colorless and a black, you can tap it, exile 2 cards from any opponent's graveyard, Deadeye Tracker Explorer. So it's a card advantage engine, and it's a cheap one at that.
Yeah, not only is it a card advantage engine, it does similar things to like Deathrite Shaman, where early on, you use it to gain these little micro advantages, but later on you can use it as a way to protect yourself from your opponent's graveyard cards.
Yeah, it does a nice job of maybe trumping Liliana, Death's Majesty, which just got countered by Supreme Will. Also good against Torrential Gearhulk as well.
Torrential Gearhulk and the omnipresent Champion of Wits from both decks.
Yeah, very good point as well. Didn't even think about that. Exploring is certainly a benefit too. Getting a little bit deeper into your deck, being able to control your draw step a little bit as well. Deadeye Tracker, again, a card we don't see a ton of, but a couple in the sideboard here for Thompson. And it looks like it might be pretty good at this game. As you saw Gerry counter that Liliana with Supreme Will, as I mentioned, and now we head back over to him. Access to 7 mana, and a lot of decisions in the hand there for the Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan runner-up.
Yeah, he's got so much he can do this turn. Flashing back Champion of Wits seems like the more powerful of the options, just because he's able to filter some of the excess lands or dead removal spells out of his hands, find some more big threats, find redundant copies of Scarab God after they get hit with Vraska's Contempts and such. He also wants to make sure he hits land 9. Once he hits land 9, he's able to play the Scarab God and activate it before Jadine is able to kill it.
Well, that is land number 8 is the hub. That'll bring Thompson up to 5 energy after eternalizing that Champion of Wits. So he, of course, drew 4, discarded 2, and he is moseying on along here very well is Gerry. Looks like he's going to do a little bit of attacking here, perhaps.
Wish.
And Torrential Gearhulk will get blocked. Of course, Gonti does have Death Touch, so they'll trade, though both cards did do a nice job this game. We go over to Jadine. She will mill the top card of her deck. Fetid Pools in the graveyard as Kanta now among the lands. And while it is a powerful land, Todd, I don't know if it can catch her up in this game.
No, I mean, I think more importantly that the extra land aspect of flipping Search for Escanta is going to be the more important of the abilities right now. Jadine can only really get back into this game if she plays and activates a Scarab God this turn. Otherwise, I think Gerry's just going to bury her.
5 mana going to be tapped here. It could be time for Liliana, and it is, so that will resolve. Death's Majesty is here. Going to return a Gonti with Liliana.
All that value.
And you can tell with these black-blue mid-range decks between Gonti, Liliana, Champion of Wits, Torrential Gearhulk, whatever card drawing you want to play, between Glimmer, Arguel's Bloodfast, and heck, even throw in that Deadeye Tracker, which is a sideboard card. This deck has no issue seeing a lot of cards each game. Now here's a Champion of Wits from Jadine's side, so she'll get a little deeper into her deck. It's just a pile of card advantage, Todd.
Oh, for sure. These mirror matches take forever. I played a deck very similar to this at it was either Grand Prix Memphis or Grand Prix Nashville, like around 6 months ago or so. Brad Nelson was working on this black-blue mid-range deck. He, I, and Corey Baumeister, and maybe a few other players on Team Genesis ended up playing his exact 75. And this is kind of where the deck originated. And it's been off the radar for a little while, but I'm glad to see it back in the hands of 2 experienced players.
Yeah, Jadine and Gerry off to a nice start thus far this weekend. Still very much live for both day 2 and top 8 contention at 3-2. Again, Jadine did win game number 1 pretty handily there with a 3rd copy of the Scarab God. No copies of the Scarab God this game yet for Jadine. It looks like Thompson considering a Ravenous Chupacabra. And that looks like that may be the play here for Gerry. He'll use that to take care of Gonti. A land. Curious to see if we'll see a follow-up just yet. Looks like the attack will take place first. And we'll see if Gerry wants to go towards Liliana or if he's just going to go towards Jadine.
That's a good question. That's a lot of damage coming through right now. Looks like he was attacking face, and 3 damage comes through to Jadine's noggin.
Yep, going to fall down to 7, will Klomparens. We'll head back over to Jadine. She will draw a card. Does not have nearly as many resources as Thompson does this game because she simply hasn't seen as many cards as Gerry has.
No, but with the multiple cards from Gonti, the value you can gain from Liliana Death's Majesty's abilities, the game is not over. And for someone who's been so far behind the entire game, for them to still have a chance to win is miraculous.
Walking Ballista and a land will go to the graveyard. That will bring a zombie from Liliana. That'll be a Drowned Catacombs there for Jadine. And we're going to head back to Gerry here in just a moment, it looks like, as Thompson will untap those 4 lands. So let's go back over to Gerry Thompson. He'll draw a card here. Has a copy of the Scarab God in hand and the requisite 9 lands to play and activate all in the same turn if you'd like. However, it is worth keeping in mind that Jadine does have one of those cards face down from the second Gonti.
What if it is a Torrential Gearhulk?
That would certainly change the equation of this game, and you have to imagine Gerry Thompson has worked that into the calculus, as he will do some attacking here, though it looks like perhaps Deadeye Tracker is going to hang back on defense.
Yeah, that's one that mitigates the card advantage from a Torrential Gearhulk, potentially.
Looks like all of these creatures are going to come at Jadine yet again. This will be 6 mana. And you said, what if it's Torrential Gearhulk? Well, it is.
Ooh.
Essence Scatter will take care of it, however.
That is.
That's going to make it hard for Jadine to win. She'll block with the zombie on the Eternalized Champion of Wits. 4 damage will come through. Jadine's going to fall down to 3. Thompson will play a Fetid Pools and pass the turn back. Jadine with just 1 card in hand. She'll draw a card here. There's a land among those 2 cards. She'll take a look at the graveyard, see if Liliana can do anything to help her catch up here. But we might see a concession here in just a moment.
Minus on Gonti again. I believe she has the Scarab God in hand, if I'm not mistaken. Look like a multicolored card.
Well, there's 5 mana, and there is the Scarab God. Thompson, however, has a commit to memory, and now we are all set. Is Gerry Thompson going to tie things up here against Jadine Klomparens? The Black Blue mid-range mirror is going to carry on to a 3rd and final one, and we'll get to watch it unfold in just a minute. Game number 3 about to be underway here between Jadine Klomparens and Gerry Thompson. It's a black-blue mid-range mirror, a deck that might be starting to pick up a little bit in popularity here in Standard. It will be interesting to see the metagame breakdown from Nick Miller as we work our way into day number 2 of competition. Of course, Standard, we've got 8 rounds of it, 4 here today and 4 tomorrow. Our top 8 will be Modern, but we'll certainly be keeping our eye on the metagame of Standard as we expect a lot of Chain Whirler decks, especially given the results of Pro Tour Dominaria. But Todd, I know you're a fan of Esper, and this deck actually looks pretty good too.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Kevin Jones pilot this deck to a 17th place finish at the most recent Pro Tour Dominaria, but just 2 winning ends on the cusp and drawing 1 and then losing 1 both against the Chain Whirler decks. Just, it really put a sour taste in my mouth. I mean, this deck is obviously very powerful. You know, it was one of the better decks in Standard before Dominaria was released. The Scarab God obviously being put to good use, but at the same time, you know, when Glintsleeve Siphoner is seeing a sideboard play instead of main deck play, you know, something is wrong. And we've seen Jadine move that direction with Gift Etherborn main deck instead, and the 4 copies of Glintsleeve Siphoner in the sideboard. And I think that's going to be a fairly commonplace practice moving forward.
Well, I do find it interesting, as Jadine has her copies of Glency Siphoner in the sideboard. Thompson has his in the main deck, so perhaps he's not expecting as much red as Jadine is. Or maybe he's just saying, I don't really care if you don't draw Goblin Chain Whirler. I'm really glad to have a Glency Siphoner. Either way, these players have certainly made their thoughts known on where Glency Siphoner should be in the metagame, as Thompson will start things off with a duress.
I mean, that's a great point, actually. I mean, Siphoner is not that good against mono red anyway, like paying life. The 2-1 body doesn't really block that well against a lot of the creatures. It dies to shock when the mono red decks were playing 3 and 4 copies of shock. So, you know, the fact that it's a little bit worse shouldn't make that much of a difference, and it is one of the best cards in the deck. You know, if you're able to lead off with Swamp, Ether Hub, Glintleaf, Siphoner, a lot of times if your opponent doesn't kill it, the game is over.
Thompson starts things off with that duress that took a fatal push, which cleared the path there for Glintsleeve Siphoner. He's got an energy right now. Of course, it does take 2 to tango in this instance. It means he does have his second energy now, and then he'll be able to use that next turn if the Glintsleeve Siphoner is still alive.
Yeah, so the Siphoner actually creates this strange sub-game here where Gerry took the fatal push. Jadine has a Vraska's Contempt, but if she wants to burn it on the Siphoner, she not only has to do it main phase, but she's also burning it on a 2-mana creature as opposed to saving it for something more powerful like the Scarab God.
Yeah, this will be kind of an interesting situation that Jadine is in. Of course, the duress that Gerry led off with, you're going to play it on turn 1 in most instances anyway, but in this matchup, it's very important to have a duress on turn 1, as your opponent can have both Arguel's Bloodfast and Searcher's Kanta, so duress can hit some very powerful 2-mana spells that the opponent does want to play early on in the game. Gerry didn't see either of those, so cleared the path, took the fatal push, and now Siphoner may start to run away with things. However, Klomparens does have land number 4. It's Vraska's Contempt number 1. As you mentioned, Todd, has to play it on the main phase.
Yeah, now Gerry is wide open to play something on turn 4 here. Looks like he doesn't have a really big play on 4 here, so Jadine not exactly getting punished, but down of Vraska's Contempt in a matchup where Vraska's Contempt is very important at dealing with the Scarab God and Liliana Death Majesty.
Champion of Wits number 2 here for Thompson. He'll draw 2, discard 2 cards here in just a moment. You saw the last one, he discarded a land and a fatal push. This time, we will see. It'll be a Torrential Gearhawk and a Swamp. Land on the battlefield tapped, across for 2. The Fetid Pools is the land there for Thompson. We head back over to Jadine. Is it time for perhaps a copy of the Scarab God?
You know, maybe shields aren't necessarily down, but Jerry's got to have a way to deal with it. You know, either he has it or he doesn't and loses. If he does have it, you're still trading 5 mana for 4 mana, so it's not that big of a trade-off. You are losing one of your best cards, but you're probably going to lose it at some point to a Vraska's Contempt, and you don't really have that much time to wait around because Gerry has this 4 power in play.
Well, Jadine's plan in game number 1 was to cast the Scarab God until Gerry couldn't take it anymore. It worked in that game. Gerry had the answer this go-around, so it didn't work just yet here. However, here is Gonti, Lord of Luxury. Jadine will take a look at 4 of Thompson's cards. Could be interested in maybe that Essence Scatter that I think she just selected.
Yeah, Gonti an insanely good check here. 3 toughness to block the Champion of Wits. Gerry a little shy on the 7th land here for flashing them back. And finding the Essence Scatter to protect herself from something like the Scarab God or a Torrential Gearhole.
Here's a main phase copy of the Scarab God, and it is an Essence Scatter. So Gerry will place both of those cards into the graveyard. Great Gonti, Lord of Luxury there for Jadine Klomparens, stopping both the Scarab God and any momentum that Gerry maybe had going.
I love this attack here from Gerry. He realizes that he's down on resources now. 6 lands, but only 1 card left in hand. Jadine taking care of all of his relevant threats, even though she's a little behind on life. But Jadine correctly assessing that the only way for Gerry to really pull ahead in this spot is to be able to bring back one of the Champions of Wits next turn.
Yeah, Gerry trying to goad Jadine into blocking here. Jadine does not appear to be particularly interested. Maybe the calculus has changed on this turn. As Jadine did just play a hub and pass the turn back. Thompson's going to attack. Jadine says, I'm not blocking. I'm going to fall down to 6. I'm not going to let you get that value.
The classic no attacks, no blocks.
Yeah.
Don't love it, but at the same time, you got to show him who's boss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see what will happen. Now, Jadine wants to take a look here, and River's Rebuke was Thompson's plan, perhaps.
Wow.
And now here's a copy of the Scarab God again. So Jadine looking to take control with that. Interesting situation here for Gerry. Is he able to peel maybe a Vraska's Contempt in this spot?
So he has no cards in hand. He has the option to pop this Field of Ruin just to thin his deck by 1. I don't love doing that, but he's in such dire straits that, you know, maybe it's worth it.
Now, this situation gets interesting as well because this go around, if Gerry attacks with both Champion of the Wits, I think it's very likely that Jadine just says block because you can only get one back.
Yes.
If Gerry attacks with just one Champion of the Wits, I think Jadine says, I'll go to 4.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a great point there. Going to 2 I don't think is acceptable. Going to 4 definitely is. And if he attacks with both, you do block both. He only gets 1.
Oh, boy.
What a top deck.
A huge
what a
top deck.
slow roll.
I don't call it a slow roll. He's got some things to think about there in that situation, to be sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he does.
So a Vraska's Contempt will take care of that Scarab God. Jadine going to fall down to 2, and now she's in some real trouble.
I don't know if I agree with the no block there. You're on such a low life total, and now if you don't peel, you're just dead.
Yeah, I think that's a tough spot, too. Jadine, I think, is looking at a land and a Fatal Push.
Well, that is a way to survive. She can use the Field of Ruin to turn on Revolt, which will kill one of the Champion of Wits. But Gerry then has access to 2 Champion of Wits out of the graveyard to refuel.
Thompson will draw his card for the turn. As you mentioned, we're going to see a block here. We'll see a Field of Ruin activation. And if Thompson did draw a negate for the turn, the game is going to end right here.
I like targeting the Field of Ruin here from Jadine's side. I think this is more of a, I'm in a bad spot. It doesn't really matter what I target because your lands aren't flip Search for Ascanta or, flipped Argyll's Bloodfast. But I do like targeting the Field of Ruin. Gerry is, 0% to activate his own Field of Ruin, and it is one of the more important lands in the matchup.
Thompson going to shuffle up his deck from the Field of Ruin. Jadine will do the exact same thing. Gerry with 1 card in hand at this stage. Not entirely sure what it is, but we are going to see a Champion of the Wits be eternalized from the graveyard. Come on back, champ. 4 cards on the way. 2 will be placed in the graveyard here in just a moment.
Okay. Jadine's on E. No cards in hand, I believe. Gerry can actually play land Fatal Push here with Revolt if he so chooses. But his hand looks like such gas now. I believe Tincture Gillhook and the Scarab God.
Well, looks like it has gotten significantly better. That timely top deck of that Vraska's Contempt, certainly a good one there for Gerry Thompson, as the Scarab God was looming and ready to take over the game and catch Jadine all the way back up. Gerry going to figure out which cards he wants to discard. Might be letting go of that Fatal Push that you did mention.
Holy moly. No, I think he's about to discard the Scarab God and a Vraska's Contempt. And so he can Fatal Push with Torrential Gearhulk in hand to clear 1 blocker. So if Jadine only is able to produce 1 blocker,
the game would have ended.
But he discarded the Scarab God and Vraska's Contempt.
Well, a winning line
bananas.
is a winning line, and it's a winning top deck and winning play there from Gerry Thompson as he